Good morning, everyone. It is great to be here back at CUEBC. Hopefully everyone's comfortable this morning, sitting back and ready to enjoy a great professional development day. PSA Day is always one of the best days of the school year, a chance to connect with colleagues that you don't get this chance to see any other time. A little different this year, but hopefully all of my CUEBC friends are getting a chance to connect, and maybe in Twitter and in the background we can have conversations as the day goes on. I was last here at CUEBC in 2016 at Riverside, and boy, what things have changed. And it's been a wild 7 weeks as we've got started for the school year. My thanks to all of you out there who have been rethinking, redesigning, and just making it happen every day in the classroom. This has been a start of the year like no other. As a parent, I'm absolutely thrilled to have my kids back in person in classrooms, and as a superintendent, being out in schools, so excited to see everything that's happening. We annually gather here, those of us who have been passionate about digitally rich classrooms in school. For over 20 years, CUEBC has been the most influential PSA for me, because CUEBC has never really just been about computers, but it's been about learning. So many great friends and colleagues are in this group. I often think back, if I could imagine when we were gathering and say around the year 2000, that we could say in 20 years, we almost have worked ourselves out of a job as a CUEBC organization. That those of us who are most passionate about the possibilities of technology would find that all of a sudden, technology was everywhere. It's what we dreamed of, it's what we hoped for. And now in so many ways, it's coming true. I now feel this different pressure of, I just hope we don't mess it up. And that's why I think CUEBC is now so even maybe more important than ever. Because as I said, it was never really just about the technology, but about the learning. And now that every classroom is a blended classroom or a digitally rich classroom or a hybrid classroom, we need to figure out how we make learning still the centerpiece in all of the work that we do. So when I was here 4 years ago, I want to share this slide that I opened with. So here was the slide. And you might remember this photo of George W. Bush. And he a little prematurely proclaimed mission accomplished. And I shared this in 2016 with that idea that in some ways, I think we were saying, hey, mission accomplished. Technology's in all of our schools. Isn't that what we wanted? Our job is done. And I made that argument now, and now 4 years later, as we have another, on the eve of another presidential election in the US, I think this is just as important, is that we got to be careful about saying mission accomplished because we have technology in our schools, or we have all kids who are in digitally enriched environments, or all kids are touching computers every day. In the end, that was never really the goal. And if we said that was mission accomplished, I think we were really missing out. A little bit on some of those things that have changed, because even in the last 6-7 months, a whole bunch has changed. So some of this in the last 4 years, but really in the last few months, you just see that massive acceleration. Reliable internet connectivity. And the challenges of years past are largely gone. And you remember how the struggles we had in schools. And I know I'm speaking to teachers all over the province today, and I'm sure it's not perfect everywhere. But where we are now is so much better from where we were just a few years ago in being able to say that when you come to school, you're going to be able to connect in and be online. That used to be a question mark for us. And more, that's not a if we can get online, it's we will get online. Devices for staff. Another one of those that there were pockets, dating back about 15 years, where we were able to figure out how to get all teachers with a mobile device. Again, maybe not everywhere, but almost everywhere, we figured out how to get devices into staff hands. And device plans for students. I'm going to talk more about this later. This is crucial. We've made some huge growth on this, but we actually have the final chapter still to write on this piece. We saw in the spring, when there is the will, we can figure out a way to get devices into kids' hands, but we have a little bit more work still to do. Our friends and our enemies, that's what the phones are. They are the greatest way for us sometimes for our kids to have that first connection to the internet, but they also can be the bane of our existence in classrooms. But we've seen this massive growth in phones, in their use and their misuse in our schools, even again in the last few months. And social media, everything is evolving. What I found was that during the pandemic in April, May, and June, when we were largely on lockdown in our houses, I heard many stories from families who said, It was actually through playing games online with their friends, or watching a Netflix at the same movie at the same time, or by other ways of those social media connections that they're able to stay connected. And there are a whole bunch of challenges, and we're going to talk about some of those this morning. But there is also this piece that social media has a role to play in keeping us connected when you can't be connected in some of those traditional face-to-face ways. And Wi-Fi. We saw that low-cost Wi-Fi is possible. And we're not quite there yet, again, but we're close. Wi-Fi should just be an expectation for everyone, that no matter where you are, no matter what your income is, that you have Wi-Fi in your house. Wi-Fi should be available for everyone, period, end of sentence, stop right there. With flexibility, I think we can really declare now that the factory model is dead. In most places right now, we're continuing to adjust how we work and learn. I see this throughout the system, but I think most people agreed it was the high school system that needed to shift most. And we're seeing all of those pieces around flexibility, around how kids learn, when they learn, where they learn. It's all those topics we've been talking about for a decade, that they've been just accelerated over the last few months. And this idea of access to material, access to content, access from anywhere. Again, the promise that we've made, and many of us in CUEBC for the last 2 decades, really accelerated over the last 6-7 months as they gain access. And a little bit about video, and to be really clear on this, I think if you're not using video, you're just not in the game right now. And that we're seeing that in our classrooms, in our schools, in our school districts, those that are engaging in traditional ways and through writing and through other ways, but also video is an increasingly important component about any ways in which we engage with our students. And what's great about this is it's not just happening in one district or one great teacher or one great principal in a school. We're seeing all of this happening across our province. Of course, it's been crazy to think about. We've been planning this for years, and everything all of a sudden happened in this emergency learning situation in the spring. Not the best time to be rolling out a whole brand new idea around learning, but we need to take advantage of the opportunity. I would argue that we've seen the best and the worst of technology in the last 6 months. In some ways, it's answered all of our hopes and dreams of what was possible, and in other ways, I think technology has met the low expectations of our critics. And some hard truths. I think we've learned which schools and districts were faking their way in the new world and which were truly invested. And the fakers were exposed. And so everybody said they were into 21st century learning, and everyone had a plan around digital, and everyone was on a roadmap or had this vision of where they were going. When all of a sudden it had to be turned on in 2 weeks, you saw this massive differences between those that had coherence and those that didn't. What we really saw were, if you didn't have your wires all straight, the truth finally came out. And those that had the wires in behind the walls and all of that work, that's not the glamorous work of technology, but those that had sorted those pieces out over the last 10 or 20 years really rose to and shone during this period of time. I want to come back to this idea, and I've talked about this probably with many of you before. So what we've seen over this period of time is what could be. On the first part, we've seen doing old things better. And you've seen me share, some of you who've seen presentations of mine before have seen me share this quote. This quote from over 100 years ago, that students depend too much on ink. They don't know how to use a pen, they sharpen a pencil. Pen and ink will never replace the pencil. And in some ways, what we did was just replace the old things in new ways. Just did the old things in new ways. But that has never been the goal. And that still shouldn't be the goal of what we're trying to accomplish as those of us who are most passionate about computer education. The real goal is doing those things that you just couldn't do at all without the technology. What's really nice is that there are so many of these obstacles in our way. And all of a sudden, these obstacles have just disappeared. You've heard that idea, well, technology, there's just no need. Actually, now there's a need. Well, there's no money. Well, there might still not be the money, but actually that's not the reason. There actually are other funds, and we have money in terms of federal investment this fall that a number of districts are pointing towards technology investments because it's now an expectation in our classrooms. Well, there's no hurry. You know, we don't have to make all of these changes now. We can slowly move these with the technology changes. Let's just take a wait and see attitude. Well, of course, the wait and see attitude just doesn't work right now. And so that obstacle disappears. There's no desire. You know, those of us I know who are most passionate about technology, I'm sure that you've been inundated by your colleagues going, hey, can you just show me how to make the Google Classroom work, or how to set up a Zoom call, or how do I do breakout rooms? All of those pieces, all of a sudden, everybody is curious. And this idea of trust. And so one of the things, and you know, there are positives and negatives to come out of the last number of months. One of the things that's come out really clearly, I think, is an increase in trust in the system. And so we have this trust built in now that we need to leverage in terms of there is trust from our families, there is trust within the system. How do we use that trust to bring forward a thoughtful agenda? We have to remember that all through this, though, there are people that would just rather find things that are easy to think about. People are looking for that, you know, why can't we just have a canned program? Why can't we just, you know, pay out to a company and they come in and drop a technology program in? You know, all of us know it's way more complicated than that. It's that mix of art and science, which is the work that we do every day. Let me make a few more kind of bold statements. So the spring. I would say the spring sort of worked. I would say the fall is working far better than the spring. In the spring, we were driven by the technology, and now there's been a more appropriate order has been set as we're driven by the learning supported by the technology. I think the real opportunity out of this all, though, is what comes next, that next 12 to 24 months, and what are some of the possibilities. Because in the end, we know the goal. The goal is actually not the stuff. And I think it's important that we keep coming back to that. The goal is not that we have every kid with a computer. While we need to have every kid with a computer, that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is make relevant, connected, unlimited learning. We're trying to find the benefits for kids of learning digitally. And we're trying to create this new norm for how teachers and students learn. And of course, those of us involved know you can't scale and sustain this work without the technology. And then tools matter, because tools impact the way you interact. You don't need to use every tool, but every tool you use, you must use well. And I think, again, that's one of those things that really came in the spring. I think some people tried to use every tool. I think those that have been most effective have had a limited number of tools that they really used and understood. And so this idea of trying to create access and direction and move to one-on-one opportunities. I want to talk a little bit about this because I'm still a real proponent around that personalization piece around schooling. But I worry about the idea of one-to-one moves too far. So what I've seen is that there's this danger as we move towards the individualization of some pieces of education, that we lose the collective good of education, and that we have to be careful in this work that we don't turn our schools into online credit factories, and that the focus shouldn't just be of the individual. You come back to those larger goals of public education, those goals around creating a workforce and creating citizenship, and those are still the goals, and those are harder to do in this digital era when kids are learning online, but those are still the drivers. And if our high schools simply become credit factories, boy, we've really, I think, have lost something. And then I think if we've simply, by giving every student an internet appliance, think we've done our job, we're really missing out. Another thing that's really come through in the last several months is that need for our kids to be connected to the world. And that even in a socially distant world, there are ways to make sure our kids get outside, get physical activity, and they combine that with the digitally rich experiences they're having. And some people think those actually run counter to each other, but done right, they actually complement each other. That you have kids more connected than ever to the world and the earth, and at the same time more digitally connected than ever as well. So let's come back and talk about equity, because I talked a bit about that off the start today. So the worry is that we will actually have a further divide of haves and have-nots. And that it's unlikely any grand plan comes together to support all students and all staff. And so that you actually get a system that stretches further, that those who are able and have access to the resources flourish and flourish more than ever, and those who don't struggle more than ever. So in the spring, I think we got close. And really clearly, we need to cross the finish line. We need to be able to say in British Columbia that every single student has access to a reliable internet device whenever they need it. And I know in many districts, people can bring their own, but that doesn't happen everywhere. And we saw in the spring when we were lending out school devices or figuring out other ways of getting kids a device in their hands, we were able to almost completely do it, but we can't lose that focus. Yes, that was emergency learning, but now as we move into the regular new way of learning, we have to make sure that we still find ways that every single child has access to an internet device every time they need it. And the second part of that is that every family has internet access. Again, you saw providers like TELUS and Rogers and Shaw and others across this country come in with low-cost plans to provide internet access for those that struggle. We need to figure out how it's just like you get your garbage picked up every week at your house, and that's just part of what we expect. We need internet access to be treated the same way. I know people will show me a photo of hey, did you see that family? What great ingenuity they had. They went and parked outside the Starbucks or the McDonald's to get their internet access. I look at that and go, okay, that's good, but that's actually not the answer. The answer is making sure that everybody has access to the internet, because we know technology can help overcome barriers of access and geography. And if we believe that technology is crucial for students moving forward, we need to make sure that it's accessible for all. If technology helps some improve, technology helps all students improve. Okay, I'm exhausted. We're going to take a Twitter break. So here's what I want everyone to do. We're going to take a couple minutes here. I want you to go on Twitter right now. And I know when you talk to CUEBC, you're probably already on Twitter, and you've been already live tweeting things that are going on this morning. I want you to share something awesome that's happened with technology since March. Post it to Twitter and tag it with CUEBC. So it could be something that you saw that you did, that's something you saw in one of your classes, or one of your kids did, or something you read in the news. What's just something really cool out there about, oh my gosh, look how we're using technology in a way that we never would have fathomed last February, but now we're finding ways to make that happen. And I'll just give us 20 seconds to post, and I'll come back and share one of my examples. All right, let me come bring us all back together as a group. It's much easier bringing you all back together when we're on video, I'm finding, than when we're in person in the gymnasium. Here's my example I'll share. This is Keith Rispin, and this is at West Van Secondary School. And this is what, right after the pandemic broke out and just after spring break, what Keith did with, was organized to get the 3D printers at the school, creating these, now I'm not even know the tool, like little widgets for your mask, so that it's easier for our healthcare workers, that it's more comfortable for them to wear. And so really cool. It's like a little thing, but like the little things are the big things. And so a really neat example about, especially as we're appreciative of all the work the healthcare workers were doing, of finding a way, that he could contribute, or that the school district, could contribute to the work. And so I'm interested to check in on Twitter and some of those things that you found. I want to come back to some of these core beliefs I have around technology. So mobile technology can change learning. I think that's absolutely true. I do think good writing still matters. That more of our students today than 6 months ago are publishing for the internet, and good writing matters. And those that get audience are the ones that are so well written. We need to teach social media, and we can't just let it happen around us. Networks are essential, maybe more essential than ever when we don't see each other in the face-to-face world. And then the real world is addictive. And so as we've got kids engaging digitally, the more that we can do to have them connect to the real world. I'm seeing so many cool examples about where you're bringing experts in via Zoom or by Teams or Google Hangouts into classrooms more than ever, because as we become familiar with all of those video conferencing tools, it's so simple to bring that expertise into our classroom, whether that's an in-person classroom or a virtual classroom. So a little bit about these next 12 to 24 months, which I started today by saying are so important. So what's the opportunity? The first opportunity is that we harness innovation. We use evidence to rethink how we organize and deliver curriculum. That we reimagine accountability. We need to align assessment and emerging ways of teaching. I think we've all found, and this isn't a CUEBC issue, this is a larger topic, but I think we've all found when we didn't have all of the same exams, universities still found ways to admit students. So let's actually reimagine what accountability looks like, because I think some of the reasons we had for not thinking differently, we actually found out in the last 6 months really don't exist. We need to remember the power of the physical world. A hug emoji is not a hug. We need to support the most vulnerable. The equalization power of education is more important than ever. We need to reinforce capacity, new coalitions and new ways for adults to learn. And so whether that is like learning today as we learn virtually and digitally, but there are absolutely new ways that we need to be connecting as the adult learners in the system. We need to build system resilience. We need to move from emergency learning, where we were in the spring, to the adaptability and responsiveness. And then we need to be preparing resources for that future that we don't yet know that comes 12 to 24 months. And that means we need to be working now to prioritize resources for a world in which we know will be digital. A little bit on what we're doing in West Vancouver and a little bit of our story. For us, Google has become our virtual home, but I'm not actually here to promote Google over anything else. What I will promote is that you have consistency in your district. If you and your district have kids navigating Teams, Zoom, and Google Hangout, you're doing it wrong. For us, it's Google. But for you, it might be something different. But what's important is that you have that coherence. These other topics that keep coming up, we're seeing coding, robotics, app development. Even more than ever, these pursuits for our students, whether those are in classrooms or in extracurricular activities, we're seeing more and more students interested. And all of these digital shifts are really part of one story. So we have that consistency, you have the connection, but really what you have is coherence, because that's what we're trying to do. We're creating this coherence in the system that it doesn't feel like different teachers are doing different things. Autonomy matters around some pieces, but autonomy in the tools is a really archaic idea. We want to have consistency and coherence in the tools. We know about educational technology. What the research says is it was worth $107 billion North American wide in 2015. It will be worth $350 billion 10 years later in 2025. And so you're going to see this ramp up still in terms of educational technology. And now here's my warning for all of us in the room. We've all been kind of nodding our heads. People like me and like you, who many of you have been in this game, for 20, 25, 30 years. And we were at the front end of this game in the late 90s and early 2000s. Many of us were the ones with that Web 2.0 expertise. And sometimes we think actually that expertise still holds today. Some of you might have been in my session, and I think it was 2002, where I talked about my delicious social bookmarking account and how exciting it was I could share my bookmarks with you. And all these Web 2.0 tools that we were excited about. I worry now that we still live 20 years ago, and that many of us actually don't know the world that our kids are living in digitally. And whether that's Snapchat or TikTok, we have to be careful about not quickly dismissing all of these new things that are coming at us so quickly. We could very easily be just that old man yelling at kids to get off their lawn. We need to make sure that in order to stay relevant, we're listening to the kids around us. And the power of CUEBC, of course, is not just making sure that people can use Microsoft and Google, though there are some great sessions today. Carrie Wilson, even from our school district, you want to go see her Google session. It will be outstanding for sure. But it's not just that our kids can use digital tools for positive purposes. It's to ask questions about, so what's around the corner next? So while I started by saying that CUEBC is now really everyone, we know that technology does not stop. It is not implemented. We need to be always looking at the changing tools in our world. If we have driverless cars on our streets over the next 10 years as a norm, you can't tell me that schools are going to be the same as they are today. And so we need to keep looking around the corner. Okay, am I the only one growing up that got fooled by this video?
It isn't only in Britain that spring this year has taken everyone by surprise. Here, in the Ticino, on the borders of Switzerland and Italy, the slopes overlooking Lake Lugano have already burst into flower, at least a fortnight earlier than usual. But what, you may ask, has the early and welcome arrival of bees and blossom to do with food? Well, it's simply that the past winter, one of the mildest in living memory, has had its effect in other ways as well. Most important of all, it's resulted in an exceptionally heavy spaghetti crop. The last 2 weeks of March are an anxious time for the spaghetti farmer. There's always the chance of a late frost, which, while not entirely ruining the crop, generally impairs the flavor and makes it difficult for him to obtain top prices in world markets. But now these dangers are over, and the spaghetti harvest goes forward. Spaghetti cultivation here in Switzerland is not, of course, carried out on anything like the tremendous scale of the Italian industry. Many of you, I'm sure, will have seen pictures of the vast spaghetti plantations in the Po Valley. For the Swiss, however, it tends to be more of a family affair. Another reason why this may be a bumper year lies in the virtual disappearance of the spaghetti weevil, the tiny creature whose depredations have caused much concern in the past. After picking, the spaghetti is laid out to dry in the warm alpine sun. Many people are often puzzled by the fact that spaghetti is produced at such uniform length, but this is the result of many years of patient endeavor by plant breeders who've succeeded in producing the perfect spaghetti. And now the harvest is marked by a traditional meal. Toasts to the new crop are drunk in these poccolinos, and then the waiters enter bearing the ceremonial dish, and it is, of course, spaghetti, picked earlier in the day, dried in the sun, and so brought fresh from garden to table at the very peak of condition. For those who love this dish, there's nothing like real homegrown spaghetti.
Of course, it's changed in terms of how we have to deal with this kind of fake news or facts and all of those parts that are so important in the work that we do in the classrooms. And you know just how much more sophisticated it is because now we have this.
Who has seen an advertisement that has convinced you that your microphone is listening to your conversations? All of your interactions, your credit card swipes, web searches, locations, likes, they're all collected in real time into a $1 trillion a year industry.
The real game changer was Cambridge Analytica. They'd worked for the Trump campaign and for the Brexit campaign. They started using information warfare.
Cambridge Analytica claimed to have 5,000 data points on every American voter.
I started tracking down all these Cambridge Analytica ex-employees.
Someone else that you should be calling to the committee is Brittany Kaiser.
Brittany Kaiser, once a key player inside Cambridge Analytica, casting herself as a whistleblower.
The reason why Google and Facebook are the most powerful companies in the world is because last year data surpassed oil in value. Data is the most valuable asset on Earth. targeted those whose minds we thought we could change until they saw the world the way we wanted them to. I do know that their targeting tool was considered a weapon.
There is a possibility that the American public had been experimented on.
This is becoming a criminal matter. When people see the extent of the surveillance, I think they're going to be shocked.
And I still fear for your life.
Yeah.
With the powerful people that are involved.
But I can't keep quiet just because it'll make powerful people mad.
Data rights should be considered just fundamental rights.
This is about the integrity of our democracy.
These platforms which were created to connect us have now been weaponized. It's impossible to know what is what, because nothing is what it seems.
But whether it is the spaghetti trees of our youth, or whether it's the social media today, we actually know this is all not that simplistic. Especially now, we know that social tools are keeping us connected. And it's easy to scare and blame without solutions. But when I watch the video clips around social media and those concerns, I keep wondering, so what's our role for schools to play and should play, and the role that teachers have in this space? And by the way, yeah, there are a lot of things that are challenging us, but I was just seeing that over 400,000 Americans signed up to vote this year through Snapchat. So there's something going on there that is resonating and connecting with people in some positive ways. And so we have to be careful about not just dismissing it out of hand. There are these bigger questions I think we should be pondering, like, as the pace of technological development accelerates, what kind of risks do you think will become more present in the years to come? And are we paying enough attention to them now? Those are the kind of questions I would love us asking in schools, with our students, with our colleagues, and in school districts. Or how about, imagine that robots have fully taken over jobs, and now humans can spend time doing whatever they please. Assuming there would still be a value of the institution of public education, what kind of knowledge and skills would human beings need in this post-work world? Big questions, but I think they're the kind that we need to be asking and talking about. We need to, at times, pull ourselves out from that day-to-day challenges that we have and look at these bigger ideas around where we're going as a system, and more largely in how we interact with society. And some of you have heard me talk about this before. I think how we do this, it's all about culture. Whoops. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think what you need to do is you need to focus on a few things. If you focus on everything, you're really focusing on nothing. What does support look like? We need to celebrate risk-taking. Now more than ever this is true. There are very few rules in a pandemic. It is all new. So let's celebrate those who are pushing. And it is time for leaders and not just followers. Let's not get locked into any one single model for what learning should look like. We need to have more models right now as we begin to search for ways that are the way forward. A little bit on how this looks in a school and a school district. First, around flexibility. It's crucial that teachers find ways to make learning more flexible for students. A school's job is to make opportunities more flexible for teachers. People like me in district office need to make it more flexible for schools. And the Ministry of Education needs to create flexible opportunities for school districts to chart their own path. And on the other side of the flexibility path is around accountability. And so how accountability works is what teachers need to do is not just give flexibility to students, but need to network students together who might have common interests or who can learn from each other. And schools network teachers together. And districts, our job is to network schools together, whether with other schools inside our district or those outside of our district. And what governments need to do is that they need to network school districts together. And the good governments are also networking with interesting jurisdictions around the world that we can learn from. Yeah, that's all good. Yeah, but how do you scale the work? You often hear about that idea, well, we have to upscale. I don't think you do. you connect and you build networks. And so think diffusion, not replication. We're not trying to create a bunch of franchises here. We're trying to take good ideas and spread them. All of our efforts need to be learning efforts. The goal is to increase learning opportunities for students that improve engagement, relevancy, and achievement. That technology is there to support them. And sometimes really complex problems have simple solutions. We know there will be external inventions that will continue to dramatically impact what we do, and we have no control over it. But in spite of that, we need to keep moving forward. There's going to be a new iPhone next year, but that doesn't mean that we got to wait till it comes out to figure out, oh my gosh, how are we going to adapt to the new form of technology? Let's be learning focused, and then we'll figure out how the new technology fits in with how we learn. So something on trends, some smaller trends to start with. And we're seeing lots of these already. More adults and students are bringing their own devices to work. Districts will own and store less. You have this tension between formal, like the regular class learning, and the informal, the stuff you do on your own. And this informal learning, I think, is going to continue to create good tension as we try to recognize it, especially again in high schools, as we have students who are actually spending less time in formal learning and more time pursuing passions outside of the classroom. How do we recognize, credentialize, and otherwise give status and value to those things that they're learning? And that digital content will increase, and hopefully we see the cost of devices to continue to decrease. To some larger trends. Online is now not optional. It's part of almost every course. And it's hard to imagine a future where online learning is not a component of education and teaching. And what we see from MOOCs and other things like that, and after school programming, which I think is really interesting around the pandemic, is that we see that online learning is going to continue to influence our system. Virtual and augmented reality. Google Expedition allows students to take more than 900 virtual reality field trips around the world. And as we travel less right now, these become more and more appealing. And this technology is growing more quickly. And when you can get Google Cardboard for $15, boy, that's an interesting entry point for our K-12 system. The gamification. We see an increased use of games in the classroom and also games that promote learning. And what's happening is that actually students are beginning to expect a sense of gamification in the digital learning they're experiencing, because they're experiencing so much of that outside the classroom. With AI, artificial intelligence, we're seeing this to help personalize learning, whether that's improve memory retention, teach languages, or increase accessibility to all lessons to a full range of students, especially some of those with diverse learning needs. Smart schools, and this isn't as learning focused, but we're seeing, just as we're seeing like smart homes, all of our appliances talk to each other. We're seeing more and more of that happening in school, where everything talks to each other inside a school building, and everything is connected. And then biometrics. I know this sounds like something out of a movie. We're seeing companies that use software to track students' engagement on camera, and lots of growth around health and safety measures as well. I know if my new Fitbit is continually able to measure my oxygen levels, my skin temperature, and warn me when I might be getting sick, some of these things are going to influence our classrooms. And I absolutely know that, just as if we had dealt with a pandemic in 2010, it would have been very different than dealing with it today. You know that if we deal with a pandemic in 2030, it's going to be very different than how we dealt with this one this time. That tension, as I said, between formal and informal learning, I think will increase. What matters most for many of our kids is that informal learning, and this is something that we have not reconciled yet. A little bit about towards the future and some other learning goals that I see happening. As we improve teaching and learning, we're equipping teachers with sound pedagogical and technological knowledge, and supporting more personalized and engaged learning. We're building digital resilience. We're developing digital competence. We know these are expectations now of all staff, and we often joke, it doesn't matter where you are. What matters is that you don't stay there, and that you don't have to be sick to get better. That all of us around digital competencies have responsibility to be engaged in improving those right now, and that we're using appropriate digital mediation strategies at home and school, and that we're providing skills for the future. We're developing the higher order thinking and social emotional skills that a digitized and automated world requires. So, all of you in this room, I know that you're the leaders around this work. As I said, it's been the most influential PSA for me over my teaching career. I'm really honored and thrilled to get a chance to talk with you today. I want to, just before I introduce a video that I'll share with you, again, with American politics front and center, I thought I'd use a quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg to finish today. Real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. I think that speaks to the work that we're trying to do. There are big goals that we have around what teaching and learning look like, and it starts by changing small things when we get back into our schools on Monday. A little video, and this is some have seen an older version of this I might have shared, I think in 2016, but just what an amazingly complex world that our kids are living in. And I think it's important to reflect on that world, just what the world is around us, and then the amazing work that you're trying to do every day in your classrooms. Again, my thanks to everyone for getting up and joining me this morning here at CUEBC. Have a great PSA day. Enjoy your sessions. And I look forward to staying connected with all of you. All the best, everyone. Thank you.